I never knew what pure, undiluted rage felt like until that night. It wasn't the kind of anger that explodes all at once. It was slow, creeping, coiling around my ribs like a snake, squeezing the air out of my lungs, making my vision blur at the edges. It was the kind of rage that makes a man silent, calculating, cold. It started with a phone call, not one I received, one I overheard. I had just walked into the house after a long day at work. My tie was loose, my shoulders aching, my mind set on getting a beer and maybe 10 minutes of peace before the chaos of dinner, kids, and whatever nonsense my wife decided to throw at me that day. I wasn't expecting to hear her voice, low and hushed, coming from the study. I should have kept walking. Should have ignored it. But something in the way she spoke, sharp, urgent, secretive, made me pause. Once I set him up in court, I'll take the kids, the house, and everything he owns. The words hit me like a brick to the chest. I stood there, frozen in the dim hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. My first thought was that I had misheard, that there was some other explanation. But then she laughed, this quiet, cruel little laugh that I had never heard from her before. A voice murmured something on the other end. She sighed almost dramatically. No, he has no idea. He's still playing the perfect husband. It's actually kind of pathetic. I felt sick. Pathetic. That's what she thought of me. I had spent years building this life, thinking we were a team, believing we had something real, and the whole time she had been, what? Lying? Pretending? Planning to gut me like a fish the second it suited her? I wanted to slam the door open, grab the phone from her hand, and demand an explanation. I wanted to scream in her face, ask her how long she had been planning to destroy me. But I didn't. Because in that moment I realized something. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating my downfall. This wasn't a betrayal, it was a premeditated execution. If I walked in there now, if I lost my temper and confronted her like some desperate, wounded husband, she would win. She would spin it into something she could use against me. Play the victim. Cry to a judge about how volatile I was. She had already mapped this out. But she had made a mistake. She thought I was blind. She thought I was weak. She thought I was going to let her get away with it. She was wrong. Moving on autopilot, I turned and walked upstairs. My hands were steady, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I packed a bag. Not much, just enough to disappear for a while. My passport, my laptop, a few essentials. Then I emptied the accounts. Every shared one. Every savings account, every emergency fund. I canceled every automatic payment, mortgage, utilities, even her precious credit cards. She was expecting me to be blindsided when she made her move. Instead, she was about to wake up to a whole new reality. By the time she walked out of the study, still smiling at whatever fantasy she had cooked up in her twisted little mind, I was gone. I didn't drive to a hotel. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't even have a real plan when I walked out that door, just a single, undeniable truth burning in my chest. I had to disappear before she could destroy me. So I drove. Not out of town, not to some distant hideaway, but just far enough to think. Far enough that I could sit in my car, staring at the city lights in the distance, and let the full weight of what had just happened settle into my bones. She had been planning this. For how long? That was the question that kept circling back, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I thought back, had it started last month? Last year? Had our entire relationship been one long con, or was there a moment when things shifted? When I went from being her husband to being her target? I didn't know. And the worst part? I would never know. But what I did know was this: she wasn't going to win. I grabbed my phone, my pulse steady now, my mind sharp. There was no room for heartbreak anymore, no space for self-pity. Those emotions were luxuries I couldn't afford. Not when I was dealing with someone capable of what I had just overheard. Step 1. Secure myself financially. I had already drained the accounts, but that wasn't enough. If she was smart, and I knew she had backup plans. I needed to be 10 steps ahead. I called the bank, had them freeze everything in my name that she might try to access. I canceled my credit cards and requested new ones. Then I sent an email to my lawyer, not hers, not the one we had used for anything joint. My personal lawyer. The one I had barely spoken to in years because, like a fool, I thought I didn't need protection from my own wife. Step 2. Get evidence. It wasn't enough to know what she was doing. I had to prove it. I had seen the messages, heard the call, but I needed something irrefutable. Something that would obliterate any story she tried to spin. I thought about going back, sneaking in, finding her phone, screenshotting everything, but that was risky. She might catch me, and if she did, it would be a disaster. No, I needed a safer way. That's when it hit me. The house cameras. She didn't know I had access to the full security system. She thought I only checked the exterior cameras, the ones facing the driveway. But I had installed an internal system years ago, one she never paid attention to. I logged in from my phone, my hands steady, my breath slow. And there she was, in our kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine like nothing had happened. She looked smug, relaxed, like a woman who had already won. She pulled out her phone and made another call. I hit record. Yeah, he left. Just like we planned. No, he has no idea, I made sure of it. A pause. A smirk. By the time he figures it out, I'll have everything. Everything. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. But I didn't react. Not externally. Internally, though, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about a cheating wife anymore. This was about war. I sat there in my car, listening as she laid out every step of her plan. How she was going to file for divorce, claim I was abusive, take full custody, drain me dry, and then move in with whoever the hell she was talking to on the other end of the line. It should have broken me. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Power. She thought she was playing chess. She had no idea she had just put herself in checkmate. I sat in my car, the engine idling, the soft hum of the city in the distance. My hands rested on the wheel, but I wasn't gripping it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was past that. Past the heartbreak, the betrayal, the disbelief. What I felt now was something sharper, more precise. Clarity. I had been married to a woman I didn't even know. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had plotted my downfall like a goddamn villain in a movie. And the way she spoke on that phone call? Like I was some clueless fool she had already defeated? She had no idea who she was dealing with. I glanced down at my phone. The recording was still playing, her voice as smooth as silk, dripping with satisfaction. First thing tomorrow, I'll go to the lawyer and file. He won't even see it coming. By the time he gets served, the accounts will be frozen and I'll have the kids. He won't have a leg to stand on. Just like we planned. She laughed then. A real laugh. The kind that made my stomach churn because I had once loved that sound. I shut it off. I had heard enough. All right, I thought. Let's play. I knew that disappearing for good wasn't an option, not yet. I had kids. No matter what happened between us, I wouldn't abandon them. But I also couldn't let her blindside me with some legal ambush. She thought she was about to walk into court with the perfect setup, the perfect lies. She thought she could paint me as the villain and walk away with everything. Time to rewrite the story. Step 1. Control the narrative. I called my lawyer first. It was late, but I didn't care. He picked up on the third ring, groggy but alert when he heard my voice. David, I need you to listen to something, I said, skipping all pleasantries. And after you do, I need you to move fast. I played him the recording. He didn't speak until it ended. Then, in a quiet, measured voice, he said, Jesus Christ. Yeah, I said. So what do we do? You do exactly what I tell you. No emotions. No confrontations. We don't let her know we have this. You need to be the perfect husband for the next 48 hours. Act normal. Don't give her a single reason to think anything is wrong. Meanwhile, I'll file first thing in the morning. We'll hit her before she can hit you. A preemptive strike. I liked it. One more thing, I said. She's been cheating. I need proof. The kind that'll make sure she doesn't get custody of the kids. David exhaled. You really want to do this? She was going to take my children from me. Destroy my life. I don't just want to do this, I have to. Pause. Then, all right, I'll set something up. I hung up and leaned back against the seat, staring at the night sky through my windshield. The air felt lighter now, like the weight pressing down on me had shifted. I wasn't helpless anymore. I was ahead of her. Step 2. The perfect performance. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. I walked in like nothing had happened, tossed my keys on the counter, and made my way upstairs. She was already in bed, the room dark except for the soft glow of her phone screen. She didn't even look up. You were out late, she said, scrolling through whatever pointless thing had her attention. Yeah, I said. Long day. She made a noise in the back of her throat. Uninterested. I stood there for a second, just watching her. This woman who had kissed me on our wedding day, sworn vows to me, carried my children. A woman I had shared a life with. And yet, right now, she felt like nothing more than a stranger in my bed. I climbed in beside her. She shifted slightly, but there was no warmth, no familiarity. Just two bodies lying next to each other in a marriage already dead. I turned my back to her, staring at the ceiling. I wondered if she had any idea that by this time tomorrow, her entire world would be burning to the ground. The next morning, I woke up before her. Not because I had trouble sleeping, no, I had slept just fine. It was because I needed to be up before she was. I needed to control the flow of the day, dictate the pace before she could. She stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent. For a moment, I watched her, trying to understand how I had ever loved this woman. How I had ever looked at her and thought she was my partner. My teammate. Yeah? She was the enemy. I got out of bed quietly, showered, got dressed, and went downstairs to make coffee, just like I did every other morning. Routine was everything. If I broke from it, if I gave her even a second of suspicion, she'd adapt. And I couldn't have that. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, staring at nothing. I wasn't thinking about what she had done anymore. I wasn't even thinking about the betrayal. That part of my mind had been wiped clean, replaced with something much colder. How do I make sure she loses? I had already called my lawyer. By now, he was filing the paperwork. By noon, she'd be served with divorce papers before she could do it to me. That was the first strike. But the financials? That was the kill shot. By the time she woke up and lazily made her way downstairs in her robe, stretching like she had all the time in the world, every single joint bank account was frozen. Every credit card in her name canceled. Every automatic payment gone. She didn't know it yet, but the luxurious little life she had planned to enjoy without me, it was already over. She walked into the kitchen and yawned. "You're up early." I took a sip of my coffee. Had things to do. She didn't even look at me. Just poured herself a cup, scrolling on her phone like I didn't exist. Like I was already a ghost in her life. That's when I saw it. The exact moment she realized something was wrong. Her thumb froze mid-scroll. Her posture stiffened just slightly. Then, in the smallest movement, her lips pressed together. She tried to play it cool. Tried to act like nothing was happening. But she wasn't as good at hiding things as she thought. Her fingers moved faster now, clicking between different apps. Then she placed her coffee down too softly, too deliberately. I didn't say a word. Finally, she turned to me, an easy smile plastered on her face. "Hey, weird question, but did the bank send you any notifications this morning?" I lifted an eyebrow. "No." "Why?" Her smile faltered. "It's probably nothing. Just looks like one of my cards isn't working." I shrugged. "You should call them." She watched me, eyes scanning my face like she was looking for something, a crack, a tell, a weakness. I gave her nothing. She tried another tactic. "By the way, what are you doing after work?" "I was thinking we could go out to dinner, just the two of us." I almost laughed. She was already scrambling. I kept my expression neutral. "Can't. Busy." Her nails tapped against the counter. Tap, tap, tap. She had thought this was going to be easy. Thought I was just some fool who would stand there, wide-eyed, as she stripped my life away piece by piece. She had no idea she was the one unraveling. After a few seconds of silence, she grabbed her phone and left the room, not even bothering to say goodbye. I waited exactly 10 seconds before I followed her. She was in the study, standing by the window, phone pressed to her ear. I don't know, she was whispering harshly. "Everything was fine last night, but now my accounts aren't working and I can't get into the savings. I think he knows something." A pause. Then, lower, "No, I'll fix this. He won't leave me with nothing. He's not that smart." I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea." I walked past the study door, making just enough noise for her to hear me. The second she spotted me, she stiffened, her grip on the phone tightening. But I just gave her a lazy glance, a slight nod, and kept walking toward the front door like I hadn't heard a damn thing. Let her sweat. I knew exactly where she was mentally right now. She was trying to piece it together, trying to figure out if I was onto her or if this was all just a glitch, a bank error, a temporary problem she could smooth over. She didn't have any answers yet, and that uncertainty? It was killing her. I stepped outside, letting the morning air fill my lungs. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and somewhere inside that house, my wife was panicking. Not so fun when the tables turn, huh? I got into my car, drove 3 blocks away, and parked. Then I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Tell me something good, I said. David chuckled. She's getting served at noon. I made sure it's going to happen while she's out, probably at lunch with her friends. Maximum embarrassment. I smirked. Good. And the financials? Locked tight. Even if she tries to contest it, we've already positioned you as the primary account holder. She'll have to go through a court battle to get access to anything substantial. I exhaled slowly. That was what I needed to hear. And the evidence? I asked. David hesitated. We're still gathering. The camera footage was good, but we need something solid on the affair itself. I have a PI following her today. Make sure he gets something airtight, I said. I want her buried under this. David whistled. Remind me never to piss you off, man. I didn't respond to that. I just ended the call and stared at my phone for a few seconds, my mind whirring. Now the waiting game. I went to work like it was any other day. Sat at my desk, answered emails, took a few calls. All the while, my mind was half focused on the fact that in just a few hours, my wife's world was going to explode. And sure enough, at 12:17 p.m., I got a text. What the F *** is this? **, I smiled. I didn't respond. Let her sit with it. Let her feel the weight of what I had done. Then, 5 minutes later, another message. Are you seriously divorcing me? Like she hadn't spent God knows how long plotting to do the exact same thing to me. Like she hadn't been ready to rip my life apart the second it suited her. Again, I didn't respond. At 12:30, she called. I let it ring. She called again. And again. By the 4th time, I finally answered, keeping my voice calm. Something wrong? Her breath hitched. She hadn't expected me to sound so indifferent. Something wrong? She repeated, her voice sharp. Are you kidding me? I just got served divorce papers at lunch. In front of everyone. I waited. Let the silence drag out. Then casually, yeah. I figured it was time. She sucked in a breath. You figured? What the hell is going on, Michael? There it was. Panic. I almost laughed. She was scrambling, trying to gain control of the conversation, trying to turn this around on me like I was the one in the wrong. Like she hadn't been on the phone just last night, planning my downfall. But I wasn't giving her that power. Not anymore. I'm busy right now, I said. We'll talk later. And I hung up. By the time I got home, she was waiting for me. The second I walked through the door, she was on me. You're divorcing me? She snapped, shoving the papers in my face. Are you out of your mind? I took the papers from her, glanced at them like they were nothing, then set them down on the counter. I'd say it's a pretty rational decision, actually. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling, eyes wild. She expected a fight. Expected me to lose my temper, to get defensive, to argue. I gave her none of it. You knew, she said suddenly, her voice quieter now. That's why my accounts are frozen. That's why my cards aren't working. I shrugged. A flicker of something crossed her face. Fear. Good. You don't have to do this. She tried next, her voice softening, her eyes going glassy. We can work through this. I know things haven't been great, but we can fix it. Oh, she was good. If I hadn't heard that phone call last night, if I hadn't seen those messages, I might have fallen for this act. But I had. And it was too late. I don't think so, I said simply. She blinked. Probably wasn't used to hearing no from me. Michael, she said, taking a step closer, her voice desperate now. Please, we can figure this out. Let's talk. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Then, with a smile just as fake as hers, I said, yeah, we'll talk. In court. And I walked away. She didn't follow me. I could feel her burning gaze on my back as I walked upstairs. But she stayed frozen in place, her mind probably spinning in overdrive, trying to salvage what little control she had left. But she had none. Not anymore. I closed the bedroom door behind me, exhaling slowly. The house was silent now, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the calm before the storm. I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't just roll over and accept this. No, she was going to try something. The only question was what. I sat on the bed, pulled out my phone, and checked my emails. Sure enough, David had already sent me the first update. David, PI confirmed she met with someone today. They weren't careful. We've got pictures, timestamps, and receipts. Call me when you're ready. I smirked. That was fast. Of course, I had no idea how long she had been seeing this guy, but based on how confident she had been in planning my downfall, it wasn't some fling. This was a relationship. One she had assumed she could transition into seamlessly once she was done gutting me financially. Except she wasn't getting that clean break. She was getting exposed. I scrolled down, saw the attachments, pictures of her sitting across from some guy at an expensive restaurant, laughing, leaning in close. Another one of them walking out together, his hand on the small of her back. And the best one? A shot of them in the parking lot where she kissed him before getting into her car. Perfect. I called David. Got your email, I said as soon as he picked up. You got gold, my friend, he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. You ready to use it? Not yet, I said, leaning back against the headboard. She's already panicking, I want her to make a mistake first. David chuckled. Brutal. All right, we'll sit on it. But the moment you want to drop the hammer, let me know. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. What's your next move, sweetheart? I didn't have to wait long. The first sign of trouble came that evening. She had spent most of the day in the bedroom with the door locked, probably on the phone with her lawyer, trying to figure out how I had beaten her to the punch. But at dinner, she reappeared. She was too calm, too composed. It wasn't real, I knew that much. But she was trying to make it look real, trying to act like she had taken the hit and regrouped. Michael, she said, sitting across from me at the dining table, I think we should talk. I kept my expression neutral, took a bite of my food. About what? She inhaled slowly, like she was trying to gather patience she didn't actually have. About us. About how we move forward. I raised an eyebrow. I think the divorce papers were pretty clear. She exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. There it was, the crack in the act. I mean, before it gets messy, she said. We can handle this like adults. We don't need to fight. I took another bite. I'm not fighting. Her eyes darkened. Michael, you froze all my accounts. I shrugged. You can't just do that. I set my fork down and finally looked her in the eye. I did. She stared at me, nostrils flaring, hands clenching on the table. She was barely holding it together now. I leaned forward slightly. Did you think I was just going to let you take everything? She blinked rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, she was still trying to gaslight me. Incredible. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. Then I said, I heard you, you know. She stilled. Heard what? She asked, voice too careful. You. On the phone. Talking about how you were going to set me up in court. How you were going to take the house, the kids, everything. The blood drained from her face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You, she swallowed. You're lying. I tilted my head. Am I? Her breathing was shaky now. She knew. Knew she had slipped up, knew that whatever game she had been playing was over. So she did what she always did when she had no way out. She turned to manipulation. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones, this time. Her lower lip trembled, her shoulders slumped. The full performance. Michael, she whispered. I was just angry. I didn't mean any of that. You have to believe me. I stared at her, unfazed. Because I had the proof. I had the recording. The messages. The surveillance. I didn't need to play this game anymore. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. She reached for my hand. Please. We can fix this. I let her touch me for exactly 2 seconds before pulling away. We'll fix it, I said, standing up. In court. And I walked out, leaving her alone with the mess she had made. She didn't sleep in our bedroom that night. I heard her pacing downstairs well past midnight. The sharp, clipped sound of her footsteps moving from the kitchen to the living room, back and forth, back and forth. Occasionally, I caught pieces of her hushed, frantic phone calls. I don't know how he found out. No, I can't just leave, everything is frozen. What do you mean, wait it out? You don't understand. This isn't how it was supposed to go. Not how it was supposed to go. That made me smile. She was unraveling, and she had no idea what to do. Every move she had carefully planned was slipping through her fingers, and for the first time in probably her entire life, she wasn't in control. By morning, she was a different person. The fear and uncertainty were still there. I could see it in the slight stiffness of her posture, the way her hand hovered over her phone as if she expected some miracle to save her. But she had pulled herself together enough to try a new approach, a desperate one. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, scrolling through my phone when she walked in. She hesitated for a split second, probably debating if she should keep up the wounded, teary-eyed act or go straight for the attack. She chose attack. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, crossing her arms. I didn't even bother looking up. "Planning what?" She exhaled sharply, impatient. "Don't play dumb, Michael. You had a lawyer ready. You cut off the accounts. You knew before last night. So how long?" I let a few beats of silence pass before I finally set my phone down and met her gaze. "Long enough." Her eyes flashed. "You sneaky, manipulative," I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, I'm manipulative? You blindsided me." She snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like how you were planning to do to me?" She flinched. A small movement, but I caught it. That was different," she said quickly. "How?" She opened her mouth. Closed it. "Yeah, that's what I thought." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Let me guess. Your lawyer told you your case isn't as strong as you thought, that the financials aren't in your favor anymore, that your carefully laid out trap just blew up in your face." Her jaw clenched. "You think you've won?" I took a sip of coffee. "I don't think. I know." The muscles in her throat tightened as she swallowed, and for the first time I saw real fear in her expression. Not just frustration, not just anger, fear. She had built this version of herself that was untouchable, unstoppable. She had controlled every narrative, every situation, every person around her for years. But she hadn't accounted for me fighting back. She took a slow breath, smoothing her hands over her robe like she could physically push down the chaos in her mind. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice calmer now. "Calculated. If this goes to court, the only ones who suffer will be the kids. You really want to put them through that?" There it was. The final card. The "do this for the children" card. I shook my head slowly, almost disappointed. "You don't get to use them as a shield. Not after what you did." Her lips parted, a flicker of something genuine in her eyes. She knew it wasn't going to work, so she switched tactics again. "Michael," she tried, her voice softening, her posture shifting into something more vulnerable. "We were happy once. We had a life together. Family. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Then I said, "Not anymore." Something inside her cracked. I saw it. The realization that there was nothing left to manipulate. That whatever control she had over me was gone. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked past her without another word. She didn't stop me. She didn't follow me. She just stood there, watching her world crumble around her. By the time I got to my lawyer's office, I already knew what my next move had to be. David was waiting for me in his sleek, minimalist office, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than my first car. He barely looked up from his tablet as I walked in, gesturing for me to sit. "Your wife's lawyer contacted us this morning," he said without preamble. "They're trying to negotiate." I raised an eyebrow. "Negotiate what?" "She wants access to the accounts again. Says she has no money, can't pay her personal bills, can't even buy groceries." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. David smirked. "That's about what I expected from you." "So what did you tell them?" I asked. "That we're not moving a damn inch," he said simply. "And that if she's really struggling, she can sell that overpriced handbag collection she's got sitting in the closet." I grinned. "Remind me why I didn't hire you sooner?" David shrugged. "Because you thought you had a good wife?" "Touché." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my jaw. "All right, so she's desperate. What's her next play?" David's expression turned serious. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Right now she's scrambling, but if we don't press harder, she'll recover. She'll come up with something new. We need to make sure she doesn't have the time to think. I nodded. What do you have in mind? He tapped on his tablet, turned it around, and slid it across the desk. I glanced down. It was an official filing. A petition for full custody. I looked back up at him. You want me to go for the kids now? David sat forward, his hands folded on the desk. Listen, Michael. Your wife was going to do this to you. You heard her say it. She was planning to paint you as an unfit father, take full custody, and use the kids as leverage. You need to hit her first. I stared at the document. I had already done so much damage. Taken away her financial lifeline, blindsided her in court, left her grasping at straws. But this was a nuclear strike. David must have seen the hesitation on my face because he sighed. Michael, let me ask you something. Do you honestly trust her to put the kids first? Do you think she wouldn't use them as pawns in this? I didn't even have to think about it. Of course she would. And that's when I knew. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about winning. It was about protecting my children from a woman who had proven she was willing to destroy lives for her own benefit. I grabbed the pen off his desk. Let's do it. David smiled. I signed the paperwork. When I got home that evening, I expected her to be waiting for me, all fire and fury. But she wasn't. Instead, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, quiet, her hands wrapped around a half-empty glass of wine. She didn't look up when I walked in, just stared at the table, her expression unreadable. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, twisted off the cap, and leaned against the counter. You look like you've had a rough day. A bitter little laugh escaped her lips. You could say that. Silence. Then, in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it, she said, I don't understand how you did this. I frowned. Did what? She finally looked at me. Turned into this person. I thought I knew you. I thought I could predict you. But I never saw this coming. I tilted my head. That's funny, because I never saw you coming either. She winced. Good. Let her feel it. Michael, she said, her voice breaking slightly, I don't know how we got here. I took a sip of water, watching her. I do. She swallowed. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. You call planning to ruin me a mistake? She flinched again. Look, I said, setting my bottle down, I don't know if you actually feel bad or if this is just another game to you. But it doesn't matter anymore. You lost. A long silence stretched between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. You're taking them from me, aren't you? My jaw tightened. You were going to do it first. Her hands clenched around the glass. Michael, please, I shook my head. No. You don't get to beg now. You don't get to suddenly play the victim just because the script didn't go your way. Tears welled in her eyes. You can't do this to me. I met her gaze. Watch me. And with that, I walked upstairs, leaving her in the wreckage of her own making. The house was suffocating that night. Not physically, it was the same size it had always been, the same walls, the same rooms, but the energy had shifted. The tension sat thick in the air, clinging to everything, turning each shared space into a battleground. I could hear her moving downstairs. Every now and then, a drawer would slam shut or her footsteps would echo as she paced from room to room. I knew what she was doing. She was panicking. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, phone in my hand. David had sent me a simple text an hour ago. It's filed. She'll be served in the morning. That was it. No fluff, no unnecessary details. Just the confirmation that everything was in motion. By this time tomorrow, she wouldn't just be a woman going through a divorce. She'd be a mother fighting for her children and losing. It was almost poetic. She had spent so much time setting up a future where I was the one stripped of everything, forced to crawl out of the wreckage while she walked away untouched. She thought she had designed the perfect plan, but she had underestimated me. And now, she was trapped. I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling, waiting. She wouldn't be able to hold it in forever. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, the bedroom door swung open. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands shaking. But it wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even desperation. It was pure, unfiltered terror. You filed for full custody, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. She stepped inside, her breath shuddering. Michael, please. You can't do this. They need their mother. I tilted my head, studying her. And what were you going to do when you got full custody? When you took everything from me? Were you going to let me see them? Or were you going to use them as leverage? Her lips parted, but no words came out. She knew what she had planned. And she knew that I knew. I stood up, crossing the room until there was barely any space between us. You were never scared of losing me, I said. You were never scared of ruining my life. But now that it's happening to you, now suddenly it's unfair? Tears welled in her eyes. Michael, I made a mistake. A mistake? I laughed, shaking my head. No, you made a choice. Over and over again. And now you're facing the consequences. She took a shaky breath. Please, I don't want to fight anymore. You don't want to fight? I repeated. Or you don't want to lose. She swallowed, her silence saying everything. I turned away, walking toward the closet. I pulled out a duffel bag, started packing clothes, moving with complete calm. She frowned. What are you doing? I zipped the bag closed. I'm leaving for the night. The kids are at your parents' house, so you have the house to yourself. Enjoy it while you can. Her breathing hitched. You're really doing this. I looked at her one last time. Yeah, I am. Then I walked out, leaving her standing there in the ruins of her own destruction that I didn't go far that night. I didn't need to. The beauty of being in control was that I didn't have to run. I wasn't the one scrambling for cover, trying to outmaneuver a storm I had created. That was her. I booked a hotel a few miles away, a quiet place with clean sheets and a coffee maker that barely worked. I wasn't there to relax, I just needed space. Somewhere I could sit and let the last few days settle into my bones. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. No missed calls. No texts. She had gone silent. Interesting. I checked my email. David had sent another update. She's been served. No response yet, but I expect her lawyer to call by midday. Let's see how she plays it. I smiled. Checkmate. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't victory, not yet. There was still a legal battle ahead. Still negotiations, hearings, decisions. But the war? It was already won. The next morning, I went back to the house. Not because I wanted to see her, but because I had to. This was still my home. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the house through the windshield. It looked the same as it always had, calm, stable, familiar. But inside, everything had changed. I stepped inside, half expecting a confrontation. Instead, I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at the divorce papers in front of her. She hadn't even touched her coffee. She didn't look up as I entered. I dropped my bag by the door and leaned against the counter, waiting. Finally, she spoke. I saw the custody filing. I didn't say anything. She exhaled shakily. You really want to do this? I folded my arms. No, I didn't. But you made sure I had no choice. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the papers. Michael, this isn't how it was supposed to happen. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah. How was it supposed to happen? She flinched but didn't answer. Because we both knew. She had mapped out every step of this in her head. She was supposed to be the one in control, the one walking away with everything while I was left picking up the pieces. But now she was the one breaking. She finally looked up, her eyes searching mine. I don't love him, you know. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? Her face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt something close to pity. Almost. Michael. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I don't know how we got here. I tilted my head. I do. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears from falling. We had a family, a life, and now it's just gone. I let out a slow breath. No, you threw it away. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. Is there any way to fix this? I studied her for a long moment, searching for sincerity, for something real. But there was nothing left between us except the wreckage of what she had done. I shook my head. No. She squeezed her eyes shut. Defeat. Finally. I pushed off the counter, grabbed my bag, and headed for the stairs. I'll be in the guest room until this is finalized. After that, we'll figure out the rest. She didn't stop me, didn't say another word, because we both knew there was nothing left to say.